Hello, my name is Brad Evan Taylor. I'm a ceramic sculptor and I'm also a professor of ceramics at the University of Hawaii at Manoa in Honolulu. The title of this particular piece is Rift. It was made in 2015 during a long-term residency that I did in Taiwan. I had an exhibition that year at the Inga Museum in Taipei. And this is one of the pieces that was made leading up to that exhibition. This particular piece wasn't shown in the exhibition. It was the last larger work that I made, and I pushed the limit a little too close. This thing was about 700 degrees the day that I had to leave to go install. So it was deinstalled, and this is actually the first time that this piece has been shown. This work is part of a series that I call Pyroclastic Deformation, and it has to do with the way that clay and fire interact to create movement and that entanglement between those elements. When I work with these particular ideas, I often fire to movement as opposed to firing to temperature. So the clay bodies are pushed around and experimented with so that they have this range where they stay put, and they have this range where they have a tendency to start to move and distort. It's generally as the clay bodies really densify and become extraordinarily vitreous. That vitreous quality is one of the things that I really love about ceramics. That point where it's between ceramic and glass, just at that point where it starts to move and it starts to transform and glassify, really become dense. One of the primary conceptual considerations of the work really relates to the concept of time. And I think a lot about geology and time. In a way, when I work with ceramics, or when we work with ceramics, we are approximating a geologic process. The clay is literally like rotten rock that has begun to fall apart, deteriorate, and that water's worked its way through and become part of the material, and that's literally what makes it clay. And then when we fire, we reverse that process, and we take that clay and we turn it back into rock. So in a way, we're playing with geology. I really love the time that the earth takes to make clay. I really wish that I could fire in that length, in that geologic time scale, as opposed to a human time scale. That tends to be impossible to do in our lifespans. So I'm left with approximating that through my firing cycles. I do fire much longer than most people that do ceramics because of the thickness of the work and because of the scale of it. So people feel like it is an extraordinarily long time, but when compared to geology, it's actually very, very short. It's minuscule. And through those long time scales, as things start to move, when I fire, I can make choices as things start to peel and things start to shift in the kiln. I generally set up vantage points where I can look into the kiln and have windows into what's going on. So I'm really using the kiln as a tool. I never fire to a specific temperature. I'm always setting up situations where I can react to what's happening in the kiln at the time, as opposed to a predetermined schedule. So it's really about reaction to the material and to the process and the way that those things interact in each individual firing or circumstance. Through the course of my career, as I've developed this body of work, one of the primary things that's happened in terms of my psyche and making this and working into this body of work has been the idea that you put things into the kiln and that you fire and that you're not quite sure what's going to happen. And that sometimes very, very unexpected things happen and you're left to grapple with those results. A lot of people would say that that's failure. I would say that it's part of discovering that invisible boundary that's your particular limit to push material around and to deal with it conceptually and physically. And that invisible boundary is something that you have to bump into and that you have to exceed to be able to discover its location. And then when you discover its location, you have the possibility or the potential to rethink what's happening or to adjust your strategy the next time around to be able to take that boundary and to be able to move it. So that idea of failure, for me, it's really about discovering that invisible boundary or limit and figuring out ways to shift it. And that process repeated over and over and over again through decades of work is what allows the scale to grow and what allows some of the magic with that instant where you choose to stop the kiln at just the right point.